Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Human Echoes recap for Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 9, Battle of the Bastards.
I'm Tony Southcott.
I am Albert Berg, and oh boy, is that a title, Tony. They're like one step away from just calling it the Bastard Bowl.
I know. It was, I'm sure it was talked about in the writing room, but they decided to keep it a little more professional and keep it at the Battle of the Bastards. I wonder if that's what it would actually be called in, like, the histories of Westeros.
I mean, they have some pretty cool, you have War of the Roses,
The
in
Battle
actual
of the
history.
Trident, although the Trident is a landmass.
I was talking about real battles, but
Yeah.
sure. I don't think we have a real battle called the Battle of the Tridents.
Wouldn't surprise me.
They're not always just named after a place. So I could see that. And then, like, back in the day, kings were named weird stuff. It's like Sir Wilfred, the, incontinent or whatever.
He was a great king.
He just didn't want to be around after he had spaghetti.
They kept that throne fully ready.
Wait, none of this has anything to do with Game of Thrones, so...
we actually don't start at the Bastard Bowl.
We do not, which we had discussed last week, like, if it was going to be all the battle, and once we started where we started, I was like, oh, duh. Of course we had to follow that up, too. So we have two battles in this, although... maybe this one, the first one that we see with Daenerys and the slavers is maybe, and this is jumping ahead just a little bit, but maybe not as. It's satisfying, but it's not like as cinematic as this one was. This just sort of ends up being just a beating that she gives to them.
Yeah, it's basically her dire warning to everybody over in Westeros that this is what's going to happen to you, because she's got that group, like she's got such a weird army. She's got the Unsullied, she's got her Khalasar, and she's got 3 dragons. And now she's got some boats.
Well, and we start off with Tyrion kind of right where we left him off, where he's trying to talk his way out of probably getting his head chopped off if she had her way. Like, listen, you came back at basically the worst times, but we've been doing some good stuff here, and even he knows it sounds ridiculous because the city's under attack, but he's like, we made progress, sort of.
Yeah. The only problem I have with this entire battle is it never felt like anybody that was important was really in any peril.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though, with it was good to have a battle where it just felt like overwhelming odds on the good guy's side. It's nice to know that, I mean, she's been through a bunch of crap. I don't want to have her have to go through a bunch of other crap to win this little squabble with the annoying guys in their ships who aren't even brave enough to come ashore.
It was about time that she actually just slapped them down, because diplomacy obviously had failed.
Exactly. And so I like that. I did want to get back to her talking to Tyrion first, because they have a great discussion about what kind of ruler she is and, how she is like her father. And he does a very significant wildfire name drop.
Yeah.
In case we didn't get it previously when Cersei was talking about it, he mentions,
or in the flashbacks that Bronn has whenever he's going through his uploading to the Matrix thing.
Yes.
It shows the city catching on fire. It's not just images from the Blackwater.
So for people who aren't sitting there analyzing every little piece of everything, he's saying, guys, there is explosive stuff under King's Landing. It's probably still there. I don't know if we're gonna see that next episode or not, but
they're kind of hinting at it pretty hard. Like they had Kygax or whatever his name is, dropping that it definitely is not just a rumor.
Who's Kygax? What?
I thought it was Kygax. It's the
Maester?
The Maester.
Qyburn,
sorry. Kygax is actually
Kygax sounds awesome.
Kygax is an old D&D character I had. Excuse me.
Oh, okay.
I crossed some wires. I've been at Comic-Con for 3 days, and my brain is a little bit fuzzy, so you're just going to have to listen to Al slightly more than you usually do.
my gut is full of Father's Day food, so I'm a little bit sluggish too, but I have a nice cup of coffee and my last year's Father's Day cup with all my cute baby pictures on it. Not my baby pictures.
Once again,
pictures of my babies.
The Bastard Bowl is on Father's Day.
It works.
I'm sure that's more coincidence than anything else, but still. Let's get back to Daenerys.
I really did like, though, a lot of the ways the battle played out, where they go, Tyrion does say to her, hey, let's actually get something out of this, because she just wants to go and burn everybody to the ground.
Yeah.
He says, no. I understand where you're coming from, and you think you're better, but you just can't destroy whole cities and be the kind of ruler you want to be. Let's do still some form of diplomacy, but, maybe a little bit more kicking of the asses as well.
Yeah.
That these guys need to understand that you're serious. So she does the totally boss move where, they're like, and you knew it was coming, right?
Yeah,
when they said, we're
it
going
was
to
pretty
discuss
obvious.
surrender.
Like, you can
Cliche.
see the dragon flying in the background while the guy's like, your reign is over. And she's like, my reign has just begun. And then Drogon just flies up, and it's like, everybody's shitting their pants.
And the move where the guys, even the move where the guys are giving up their other, like somebody got to die, and they say, well, this guy, we don't like him. He's lowborn. He's total social.
He doesn't speak
kill him.
for us.
And they're like, all right, and they kill. I was like, they're obviously killing the other two. This is going to be one of them King Solomon decisions where,
Yeah.
Tyrion understands how to get at least that much out of them, and he's smart enough not to try to make the same deal again. He's like, all right, guys, I did try to do the diplomatic approach. You totally screwed me on that, so you're not getting out of this alive.
Yeah, because Tyrion's never been all that comfortable with death, and to see him kind of in a position where he has to be the one to, well, he's not doling it out this time. Like, he hasn't killed anybody since his father, but, like, to actually kind of execute some people. It was a little bit different. Well, and they
still do he still leaves as many people alive as he can. You see Grey Worm say to the guys, and it's really sort of their MO, right? He says, hey, you guys can stay here and fight for these guys who would not fight for you, or you can go home to your families. It's all good. They're like, you just see them run away, which is a lot of fun. And despite the fact that it is a one-sided beatdown, the dragons burning those boats that were already full of very flammable materials.
Yeah, all the pitch and everything.
Pretty satisfying. They burned some of those, there was explosives as well in there, but they burned some of those boats completely in half.
Yeah, like it started sinking not because of like explosions from the pitch and tar and all that stuff, but straight up because they just focus their fire till it falls apart.
Which, I don't know, we get to see, like, the wide scope of, okay, how many ships did they beat up? Like, obviously there was a rout, and they won. And nobody even took, like, I thought I was interested that, like, nobody got a bow and was like, well, let's see if we could, shoot these guys or something. Because they're dragons, but they're not immortal. Like, they're pretty difficult to kill, but
Danny.
So was 1-1.
Yeah.
Not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but, what I feel like before the series is over, at least one of these dragons will be dead, if not two.
I was wondering if one was actually going to bite it today, because I was thinking like one good catapult shot or something like that, and that could be when Daenerys just decides to burn it all down.
Well, she didn't need that to decide to burn it all down. We do then move on to the actual Bastard Bowl, the prelude to the Bastard Bowl, if you will, the sort of the hype game beforehand. Jon and Sansa ride out with their guys, with Davos and everybody, to meet Ramsay Bolton with his guys. Jon challenges Ramsay to a one-on-one fight, tries to get inside of his head, and it seems like he's doing pretty okay until later.
Yeah.
My read on this scene was like, okay, yeah, Jon's kind of planting some doubt in his men's minds a little bit, and sort of trying to get under his skin.
I don't think he would have enough time to really spread that sort of information that Ramsay's a coward who would rather watch his people die. But it is really calling him out. And to somebody that's honorable, that might actually mean something.
Which, Ramsay's not. And I mean, to be fair, he has a point. He's like, why? I'm not, like, why would I do that? I probably would lose. I mean, we know how this episode ends. Jon Snow has been, like, through the worst battle of his life, right?
Yeah.
Almost crushed to death, which we will talk about that in depth in a minute. But, fighting all day, almost crushed to death, like, running, and he still basically takes out Ramsay with no problem. Ramsay knows he would get beat down if, like, a fresh Jon Snow decided to go at it with him.
Yeah.
That he would not stand a chance. And he says, like, listen, I don't have to find out if you're better than me because my army is bigger, which is what I would say. Tony, yeah. I would definitely be like, no, we're going to do the battle thing, dude.
It's always the small combat force that wants to do the one-on-one battle thing in the old-fashioned way. Unless you've got a really, really good champion, all Achilles style.
Yeah, I was gonna say you got your David and Goliath things, where the Philistines arguably were probably a bigger force than the Israelites, but they still like sent the guy out. And there's historically, I don't know how many historical precedents there are for one-on-one champion type battles, but it does seem to make sense. Like, a bunch of our guys are gonna die, a bunch of your guys are gonna die. If we can both agree to just settle it this way, we don't have to kill so many people.
Yeah,
but,
and that would probably work for minor territory disputes, but not like entire blood relations and everything else that have been slaughtered so far.
Yeah, it needs to be. And really, nobody would have been happy if it was just like a one-on-one sword fight. They would have been like, "All right, and John wins."
It would have been like, "Yay, let's we just saved the budget."
They did not save the budget in this.
No.
Holy crap, they did not.
Yeah, it's like all next week is going to be just like a picture of Game of Thrones in the soundtrack.
You stole that off of Reddit, but it's still funny.
Yes. You gotta really start tracking these usernames.
As long as they're not listening, they don't know, Tony. And as long as I don't oops, I called you out on it.
I mean, I could edit it out, but I'm not going to.
We get back. So
one last thing on that scene is
go ahead.
Everybody's favorite 11-year-old, Little Miss Angry Mormont, is at that scene
that's
too.
True. She
staring
doesn't get enough
daggers.
stuff in this episode.
Yeah.
She was in. I mean, I assume she didn't actually go into the middle of everything.
Yeah, I'm sure she was probably at the back and everything. She doesn't seem like she's trained yet for that sort of thing. I don't think she would be shy to it. Her mother and her sisters were not shy to it, but I don't think she's quite there yet for a battle of this size.
It was nice to see her
that I
pop
wanted
in.
to cover about this girl, that there's a lot of people who think that Tormund is her dad.
Okay, why?
Because all the wildlings make fun of Tormund for having sex with a bear. And never once in Lord of the Rings is her father mentioned, only her mother, and her mother was called the Great Bear.
She's from Lord of the Rings?
Was she?
You said Lord of the Rings.
Oh, I meant in Game of Thrones. Or A Song of Ice and Fire, etc., etc. But that is an on-fan theory.
Does she even appear in the book?
She's been mentioned
been a
in
while.
the books.
Okay.
So.
I'm not saying she doesn't. They're big books and there's several of them and I have read them, but sometimes those details I'm just like skipping by a little bit to get to.
It's like 1,000 pages.
Yes.
Nobody's going to remember everything unless she's an actual character in the books.
It also might be one of those things where it's like probably could be true, but doesn't actually end up having any bearing on the plot.
Yeah,
who knows?
I just thought it was kind of funny.
It is very funny if that ends up being the case, and would make a lot of sense. They have a very similar facial expression.
Yeah.
Just sort of, I don't.
Whenever she gets older and hits on
people,
it's gonna be scary. Just eating that chicken, staring.
Speaking of Tormund, we get to their strategy session, and maybe my favorite part of that was John explaining to Tormund, like, this is what happened. This is the pincher movement. He says something else first, and then he says, the pincher movement, and he's like, remember when they came at you from both sides and squished you like bugs? And he's like, oh yeah, we definitely don't want that. Which I don't know if that's Tormund being dumb or Tormund being ignorant. And by that I mean ignorance. Ignorance, one of those like really loaded words. But when I say it, I mean like he doesn't know the terminology, but he might still understand that a pincher movement is a bad thing. He just doesn't know all the ways to talk about it like John does. I don't know the specifics there, but it was a fun little bit. And they have all the stuff they talk about. They set up. They said they dug trenches. I never saw those trenches, and it didn't matter because John's an idiot. But we'll get to that in a minute too. But they set up all their strategy and everything. Davos has his say. Tormund has his say, and they kind of say, all right, good, break, huddle over.
And then
Sansa
comes, sort of has her say, or at least she's going to say it even if nobody's listening.
Well, right, Sansa comes in and she's like, you guys, none of you know this dude. You think you just got a read on him? You think you just got inside his head? No, you don't understand. He will dominate you. He understands how to get inside people's heads. He plays games with everybody. He's playing games with you. Don't do what he wants you to do, which John's like, well, what do you mean? Like, of course I'm not going to do it because you're stupid dude. I understand you have plot armor, and I don't hate you as a character. You're pretty cool, but man, do you do some dumb stuff in this episode. And she tells him to wait. Okay, so here's something that I have a question about. and again, this is a little bit skipping forward, but she says, we need to wait until we have more men. And Jon's like, we're not going to have more men. And Sansa doesn't say anything. Obviously, more men are coming, and they are coming to her aid. Does she know in this scene that there are people on the way and just elects not to tell Jon? Or is she like...
I think it's a test of faith for Littlefinger.
You mean like she's...
Yeah, in Littlefinger. Like, basically, she's seeing if she still has that sort of control over him.
Okay, my assumption was that she had sent out the Raven to him saying, help, 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 we need some help, pretty bad, but hadn't got a response from him.
Yeah, there wasn't anything on screen anyway. She might have gotten a response off screen because she was pretty confident people were coming to help.
I would have liked to see her send the Raven at least. I didn't need like a big giant flag.
She did send the Raven last time, remember?
Okay, did she?
Sent it to.
I had
We
forgotten.
never saw her receive a Raven.
And maybe she didn't. Maybe she was just sort of saying, hey, I think maybe some people... But she's still not comfortable telling Jon about Littlefinger, about, And we see, to sort of skip ahead to the next time on, he says to her, you know what I want, right? Like, it's not... I wasn't subtle about that. I think you're hot like your mom, and I want to bang, essentially.
He's like, are you hot for teacher? Maybe.
And so I think she had some of that in mind, and she doesn't want to tell Jon, like, I might be going to marry Littlefinger so we can win this battle. There's a lot of layers there going on that she's not saying and aren't spelled out in the plot, but I really liked her sort of getting her say in and being maybe the smartest person in that room, at least as far as this battle is concerned, because all of her little predictions turn true. Jon does do exactly what Ramsay wanted him to do, and he should have waited for the guys to show up.
Well, she should have just outright said, I think there are knights coming from the Vale. Like, I still don't see why there's deception there.
I understand
that.
Does
she not trust Jon, or is it just that she doesn't know if Littlefinger's going to be coming? Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me why she's so secretive about that. Because you think Jon would accept help from Littlefinger regardless.
From anybody. Yeah. I mean, I think he probably would accept help from the Lannisters at this point.
Probably.
If Jaime rode up and he's like, hey, we can take this guy on and deal with our problems later, he probably would take it, but I don't know. We'll see how that plays out in the next episode, and maybe it won't have any more bearing. We've seen a lot of stuff that kind of didn't follow through that much this season. Sort of like what seemed like big moments at the time where it was just like, oh, well, I guess we're not really going to address that anymore. Like,
yeah, like healing from stab wounds to the belly that looked pretty bad.
Or I was thinking of super old Melisandre.
Yeah, that's true.
That was just
that was just like a moment of vulnerability showing you that she's ancient.
I know it was, but it seems like that was just kind of the thing that... I mean, that was the episode ender. That was the bum, bum, bum. Yeah. And let's never speak of it again. There's a little scene between Tormund and Sir Davos, just sort of camaraderie between them, before the war.
You see how they both handle their pre-battle nights, which I can't even imagine how scary that would be. Like, you just know the next day that you're going up and you're outnumbered 2-1. They have better positioning, and you're just going to either get drunk or you're not going to sleep.
Yeah, and, Davos wanders off and finds the pyre where they burned, what is her name? I forgot. The daughter of Stannis. Anyway, I'm sorry, I've forgotten her name. But, finds the little stag that he had carved for her. Thank you. And, sort of thinks about the man that he served before and the man he's serving now. And, him and Tormund had that exchange about, like, hey, the guys we served turned out not to be that great. Davos says, hey, I really believed in this guy, but man, was he messed up kind of towards the end there, especially with that red woman and the, killing his own daughter. And Tormund's like, hey, my guy was pretty cool, but still got killed by your guy. And neither one of them ended up being the right dude. So now we're following Jon, who's not a king at all.
Yeah, they were both wrong about their kings.
Which are we kind of leaning towards the idea that Jon might be like sort of the once and future king or whatever?
Azor Ahai or whatever.
Yeah, I mean that's seeming more and more. He did, Melisandre did see the Azor Ahai triumphant in Winterfell. Like, it's really hard at this point not to be like, well, there's not some other interpretation of that I can think of. There's not some other person who's gonna. Well, maybe there is.
The other person is Dany, because like in Bravos, they are, or on that side of the world across the Narrow Sea, they're straight up saying it's her as the Azor Ahai.
Maybe there's two of them. Who knows? Maybe there's like
or maybe they go true Targaryen and they get married, brother and sister.
That could be as well. All those spoilers, Tony. We actually haven't seen that confirmed. It's heavily implied coming towards this season, but not totally confirmed.
I wonder if we'll see that next episode. But anyway, moving on.
John also goes and talks to Melisandre. Says to her, "Don't resurrect me," and she's like, "I'm not making any promises," which was I thought kind of an interesting. They put that in the preview for this episode, just the part where he says, "Don't bring me back." And
I think they just wanted to add like, well, he doesn't really have plot armor.
He totally does. After this episode, I don't know what's gonna kill him at this point. They even at the little post episode thing, the creators are talking about. Yeah, John gets really lucky in this battle. Well, again, we'll talk about some of that. But I like that she was like, "No, at this point, if I can bring you back, I'm gonna bring you back because if I can, that means I should because I wouldn't have this power otherwise." And the great line where John asks her, "What kind of god would?" bring me back just so I could kill me, and she's like, the one that we're dealing with is that kind of god.
The only one we have.
Oh, and I wanted to mention too, they're in the scene with Sansa, between Sansa and Jon, where she was like, "Hey, you don't know this guy." She had a great line that I thought summed up basically all of Game of Thrones, where she said, "No one can protect anyone," and
much.
Jon had said like, "Well, I'll protect you," and she's like, "You're dumb."
So far, the only person that has a kind of flawless record in protecting other people is Pod.
Littlefinger's pretty good too.
Yeah.
When it comes to Sansa, he's gotten her out of some pretty tight scrapes. Oh no, but he didn't
put her in harm's way too, though.
Yeah, he sold her off to Ramsay. Not a great move. Yeah. We cut back before the battle. We get back to Meereen for a little bit with Tyrion and Daenerys sort of facing off against Yara and Theon, who just showed up apparently.
Yeah.
I guess we didn't need to see the scene where... Well, I mean, they were traveling the whole time, but we didn't see them, roll into port or...
Yeah, it seems like a kind of an inconvenient time to be bringing a fleet to Meereen. That's a good way to get your ships burned down. She's a little bit, hot after this.
Literally. And also in a sexual way. But, I would have been cool to see them come in and start bombarding the fleet that was besieging Meereen and kind of helping her out. That would have been a neat little oh hey, they're here now. And then when we cut back to them, but maybe it was a budget thing because I imagine this episode cost
or a way for them to capture the ships without burning them down. Have Yara and Theon doing that.
Yeah, because they do need quite a few ships.
Yeah. And Yara brought 100 ships with her.
And it's interesting to see Tyrion and Theon meeting back up, and Tyrion saying, "Man, the last time I met you, you were not a nice person, and I don't trust you." Essentially, and Theon, kind of owning it, saying "Yep, I got no excuse, but I've been through a lot." And Yara kind of sticking up for her brother, saying, "Hey, he atoned for it." Tyrion's like, "He's not dead, so he didn't atone." And it's a really interesting look at something we've kind of touched on a lot with these guys, is that they've done a lot of bad things, but we can still be on their side, and to see the people that they've done the bad things to now in the same room with them negotiating was a great angle to have, where we have all these sympathetic characters that also have somewhat different interests.
Yeah, and you see Yara putting it out there that basically she can help get the ship she needs to get back to Westeros. And there's a little bit of she likes the idea of Yara on the Salt Throne. She really likes the idea of a woman taking over, especially after Theon says that he's not worthy of it.
Her and Yara have a great little moment of chemistry, because Yara's not afraid of anything. She comes up and she says, "Hey, we're here for, our brother's going to try to marry you." And she says, "Oh, and you're not going to try to marry me." And she's like, "Hey, I'm down for whatever."
Yeah.
That would be
Just like
that
the
would be
little-
an interesting twist.
Yeah, I was actually talking to some people online about that. Like a few people that were really excited that Yara was hooking up with girls, and I was just dropping the maybe Daenerys needs a queen, and just seeing their reactions, and I got like all caps yeses over and over and over again. So people are down with the idea.
People are down with the idea. Although I will say the real reason Yara is down with the girls is so they don't have to show anybody having any dong out in this show ever that isn't weird and gross. Like if Yara was into dudes and we had to see somebody's dick, that would be just, again, Game of Thrones thinks dicks are gross.
They pretty much are.
Okay, well, I'm just saying there might be people out there that have a different opinion, and we just have to write Yara as someone who isn't one of those people so that we can keep throwing boobs at the screen.
Who knows? She could be into both. She's just a surly sailor.
But yes, okay, that's fine. Whatever. It's just something I thought about then that scene a couple episodes ago when they were at the inn, and sure is a good thing she was into women, because otherwise we would have had to deal with some dudes being prostitutes and
more dong.
Yeah,
They
Game of Thrones
apparently
doesn't
used
like
all that on the Oberyn scenes.
But after they kind of make their deal, and Daenerys does kind of ask a little bit much of them. She says, "Hey, you guys got to stop the raiding and the raping and the pillaging thing. That's not cool."
Yeah,
and Yara
it's
says,
a complete change of life for the Greyjoys.
But Yara's down with that. She says, "Okay, you know what? we'll be better rulers," and they kind of shake on it. And
well, she wanted to bring legitimacy to the Greyjoys anyway, but I think she figured she would get it in kind of the old Greyjoy fashion.
Well, she's willing to do it. She's playing the game at a pretty close to top level now. Really, she started out as a pawn and moved up fairly fast. She had nothing, and all of a sudden moved up to, "Hey, let's make a deal with you." That's a baller move, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And she's like the first of the people in Westeros, or the Westeros lords, to really do that too.
I mean, there's a lot of people wheeling and dealing and trying to get in with the right guys, but I don't think anybody so far. I mean, I don't say anybody, but most of the people, the other sort of big houses, haven't understood what a real threat Daenerys is. She's sort of like the White Walkers to them, in a sense. It's like, I've heard
sight,
things.
out of mind.
Right, like we're dealing with our own stuff, so whatever crazy dragon lady that she's way over there on the other side of the ocean, we don't have to worry about her. And Yara kind of going over there and saying, "Hey, we'll go with you, and we understand that you are going to be kicking some serious butt soon, and we would like to kick simultaneous butt with you."
Yes, we will carry you to kick butt, and then fight with you. But the reason why you guys are all here is because the Battle of the Bastards happened, and that's what we see next.
And, I mean, Sansa was right, Tony. Sansa totally called it. I'm saying Yara. Ramsay gets inside Jon's head. He pulls out Rickon, despite the fact that Jon said, they're not going to let Rickon live. Or did Sansa say that?
Sansa said that. She was like,
wow,
"You don't understand that, he is Ned's heir. Like, he is the most legitimate out here, other than a bastard and a girl. He has the most claim to Winterfell."
And so he sets him out, makes him run towards the front lines, and gets Jon to go out like a moron by himself. Why? I don't. First of all, no, I don't.
Oh, Al's being a spoil sport.
I'm just angry. I'm just like Jon should have known better. He should have. He hasn't seen this guy in years. You have everything right. You have the lives of thousands of men. Or I think he has thousands, several thousand.
He's
has
got
2,000?
between 2,000 and 3,000, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, riding on this battle, and you're going to sacrifice it all for your one little brother you haven't seen in forever, and it's just... Even when he stayed out there, the worst part was when he was like, "Well, he sees his brother die, and he's like
particularly brutal. Like, probably could have been saved by some zigzagging, but
yeah, there was a lot of people yelling about that.
Just run serpentine, dude.
I think the point of the scene was that he couldn't get out of it. The point was that Ramsay was toying with him, and that he was probably dead one way or the other.
Yeah, and then it still struck me though. Like, as soon as that arrow went through center mass of the chest, I was like, "Oh shit, that's another dead Stark." There's no coming back from that one. And then like they amplify that point next as John is kind of charging forward by like throwing a full volley, and you just see like 4 more arrows land in him.
And why? Like, turn around, go back to those defenses you talked about, John. You said you dug all these trenches and all these things to stop him from getting you. Go back to that. But no.
John's an emotional guy.
And so Davos has to be like, okay, guys, I guess, charge. John, again, so lucky, gets, facing down, which was a great shot where he's facing down against, like, the entire cavalry charge with just him on the ground with his sword out, like, oh, I'm going to die. Maybe I'll take somebody out with me. Gets caught right in the middle of that cavalry clash. Just insane.
Yeah, like, this might be the best cavalry crash I have ever seen. Like, I've seen some pretty good ones in movies, like, you've got some good ones in Lord of the Rings, but they look a little bit fake now whenever you go back and watch it. Like, Riders of Rohan just, like, run over people, they like everybody's paper and all that. This is, like, the camera shakes from the impact of the horse slamming into another horse, and just everything becomes chaos. And I'm trying to remember if this was on, like, a Hardcore History recently. Yeah, it was the last Hardcore hit. No, it was Daniele Bolelli's History on Fire, where he was talking about the old battles and how it just turned into piles of hacking and slashing and chaos, and how much worse it would have been to be a soldier that's literally having to skewer other people in these muddy, disgusting, just nastiness. And this battle did everything to show that. Just the chaos on all sides, and how it's mostly luck if you're going to survive.
Well, there's also, you mentioned Hardcore History, and I don't know the reference that you're leaving, but they did I believe in the Kings of Kings episode, that was the most recent one, he talks about a battle between two forces where and you see this, how far away they start. Like, it looks like they're kind of close, you have the two lines, but you realize that the guys have to get to each other, and there's a good pace of ground between them, and there was a Greek battle, I think, where they talked about how the historians doubted the veracity of how it's described in the accounts, because they're like, how in the world did these guys manage to run for a mile in full armor with swords and everything and then actually fight? Like, there's no way you could sprint for that far. Although, I think most historians haven't actually been in a battle. Maybe don't understand how...
Yeah, but like a full-on sprint wouldn't make sense just because you wouldn't want your guys going into a fight that fatigued. So I understand where they're coming from with that.
But you do see that here. You see, like, the distance they have to travel, the amount of, terror as you clash together. And you see Ramsay is a little bit dumb as well. He maybe
doesn't
not
care
dumb,
about
ruthless.
his men. He doesn't care about his allies. He's just like, we're going to kill them all, so keep firing arrows into the morass. And you see Davos being like, okay, we're just going to kill each other, so we're going to charge in there and help out.
Right, and he holds back with his archers so that he doesn't do what Ramsay's doing, with just killing his own men, which I think ended up being a bad move for Ramsay.
Well, it definitely did. It turned it into just a meat grinder in the center. Like, he might have been able to respond to the Knights of the Vale if he had saved his men, basically.
Yes, if he thought a little bit more tactically. I mean, props to Ramsay for getting inside John's head, but maybe not the greatest commander ever. He's okay, but he's commanding a force that's bigger, and I'm not going to give him too many props for the way he moved them, because that was just dumb.
Yeah, I will say, it would, he'd be using a little bit more of different waves and different tactics for that.
I was a little bit. I would have liked more of the battle to be a little bit less chaos from a cinematic perspective.
Like, get some hover camera over the top for more of it.
Yeah, just to give a real sense of everything happening all at once. And I understand that there is something visceral about that camera shake and those rapid fire cuts, that is a valid way to show that kind of chaos. But there's a part of me that wanted to see kind of a few I don't need a minute and a half take, but some really longer
you see
shots.
A little bit of that whenever the shields have everybody surrounded and they've got the tall shields and the phalanx.
Well, that's a lot more You get to see that, but that's less. Then they're not moving anymore, right?
Yeah.
Then that's just them sitting in the middle of the shield.
Yeah, you want to see like the panning shot overhead of the lines actually clashing. But
yes,
like I don't know, it's still just so perfect how they did that. Like anytime you get 50 horses, like I know there's probably more in the battle, but that's what it looked like they had in that scene. And you just have them running at pace with swords out and everything's in super slow motion. It's just those scenes just always get to me.
I'm not trying to knock the battle or anything. That was just something that I thought a little bit. It wasn't like it ruined it for me or anything. It was just a little bit of I wanted something slower a couple times.
They did a little bit more of that with Hardhome, and this one was more about like the up close, like intimacy of medieval combat.
And there was a lot of, I mean, John, that moment where he, he's hacking away at people. You see a lot of, I mean, kind of to go back on what I said, you do see that sort of, there's a lot of cuts, but you follow him as he's going through the battle and people are falling around him and, he's hacking and they're hacking and somebody's charging at him and then another horse like charges into that horse and the guy,
the guy's about to hit him, but like then gets flattened by a horse and then he's going to go and talk to a friend and the friend gets an arrow to the eye and...
I don't even know if it's a friend. It's just another guy next to him, and he says, "Good job!" Bah! Right in the eye. And you just see him like, "Oh my gosh, what am I? What is I? This is awful." I mean, he's been in battle before,
crawling over piles. Like it's.
I didn't notice that bit.
Yeah,
wow.
There are a few. There's a few spots in there where you just see like battered legs that are completely cut off, and like the little trailing pieces of meat as they're trying to climb up the pile to get away.
And speaking of the pile, you get that giant pile of dead bodies. That is something that I don't think I've ever seen. I've seen piles of bodies a couple times, I think, in movies, but not like in this context.
Yeah, not
in
an
a
active combat scenario. Like I've seen, like in 300, you had them build the wall out of bodies and all that, but that wasn't like spectacularly realistic anyway.
I don't remember that from 300. I remember some of 300. I remember a lot of slow motion. Which is not going back on what I said earlier. Not really what I needed from this scene, but it was so. It just made you realize, like, oh, there are so many dead people here, and it wasn't. The interesting thing was you didn't feel like, oh, look, there's a bunch of dead Ramsey guys and a bunch of dead. Like it was just once they're dead, they're dead.
Yeah,
they're just. Like it doesn't matter once you're dead, you're gone, and the the battle raging on around you. The fact that it became part of the formation of the battlefield, that they were like when they got hemmed in by Ramsey's forces, that like one of the things they were up against was that giant pile of bodies.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so messed up. But I think for me, maybe the most visceral moment of this and the most like real battle moment was when John falls down in the middle of the retreat. Ramsey sends his shield guys to surround them in a move that they said was meant to echo the Hannibal's tactics against the Romans.
Yeah,
and they're surrounded.
Carthage, and like basically they killed them to a man by surrounding him like that.
Yes, not Hannibal Lecter. Hannibal, the guy who with the
he had elephants. Look it up.
Elephants. I'm just imagining a weird crossover. Hannibal Lecter, like, moving around the battlefield.
I mean,
like
they might have gotten along, really.
They might have. But he gets pushed down, and you hear stories like this of people in sort of mosh pit situations or in mobs.
Yeah,
and if you fall down, you're dead. Like, and honestly, I think like
Soccer
the fact
riots.
that he made it out of this is maybe the least realistic survival in this episode. I know that would be a crappy way for a main character to go, but like you don't like people when they're packed that close together, they can't not step on you.
Yeah.
There's nowhere else for them to step. They're so packed together, but
it's so claustrophobic though. Like I was sitting there like getting all like tight and weird on my couch like, "Oh crap, that's so bad." Like there wasn't a moment where I was like, "Is he going to die from this?" It was just like this is the worst possible place you could be on the entire battlefield amongst all the dead.
And he's under his own men, like getting squished into dead bodies by his own guys who are surrounded by, the bad guys. But like he almost got killed by his own guys. Even when he got picked up, he's like they're still squished together so hard you can tell he's still having trouble breathing.
Yeah, like the only reason he's able to get his breath back is because he's kind of above them.
Which that to me was kind of like the moment of the episode that just sort of got me in the gut. All the battle stuff was cool and everything, but to see him in that claustrophobic space and to know that that can actually happen to people. I mean, getting hacked to pieces by swords can actually happen to people too, but I mean, today in our society, people get trampled, in
like
Walmarts.
Every couple of years you hear about like some European soccer stadium or Brazilian soccer stadium where like things just go crazy and like 12 people get crushed under fences and things.
Or Black Friday,
Yeah. It happened to a few people on Black Friday.
And it seems almost comical when you hear about it, like, oh yeah, consumerism, but like just to think of being trampled and trampled and trampled and never being able to get up, and the way they captured that sort of captured the battle. I think the fact that okay, these guys are dead, and they're they do try to make a stab against it. Davos is like, all right guys, let's we got to poke a hole in here, which was nice to see before they got rescued.
Was 1-1. I think like he might have been able to just like get through that, but even he was having trouble with all the spears because they've got like 15-foot long pikes.
Yeah, they look like they were actually held by more than one guy. Like the spears went back through the line so far that like the back line of shields were still holding them.
Yeah, like the Roman phalanx was always designed to be held by at least 2 soldiers, like so that they could be running the first guy holding the shield in one hand and kind of guiding the spear, the other people holding the spear for like steadiness and force. So whenever you finally did have that phalanx crash into a line, it could skewer like 3 people deep.
Ugh. But yeah, and 1-1 does do pretty well, but you can tell they're not gonna win, except Jon's plot armor kicks in once again, and Littlefinger comes in with his guys and routs Ramsay's forces.
Yeah, because all of Ramsay's cavalry are dead because he was dumb and killed them all.
Yeah, he wasn't. He wasn't the greatest statistician. He thinks he's so smart, Tony.
Well, that's because he's gotten away with everything he's ever tried.
Fair enough.
Like he made him arrogant.
That's the affluenza defense.
Yeah.
He didn't know any better. His daddy didn't teach him. Which is probably true. His daddy should anyway.
Well, he might have eventually taught him if he hadn't stabbed him in the gut.
He tried to. He did try to be like, listen, dude. And then he got stabbed. So Littlefinger comes to the rescue with Sansa, who I love her. Like, she's sort of she wins the episode for me in a way. Like,
well, she even has another scene coming up, like, after this whole thing. But you see, like, her, and she's just looking over the battlefield being like, look, I know I had to bail you out again, and you didn't listen to me. Maybe you'll listen next time.
It wasn't quite that smug in my mind, but she was like, all right, we got it. We're going to win now. She's sitting there with Littlefinger, who, as we mentioned before, is probably going to want some stuff from her. And, I mean, like, sexual stuff. But he, at least in a weird way, loves her. I think he's not going to treat her like Ramsay treated her. And there's a possibility that she can just own him. Yeah. I don't know if she's far enough along, but it's possible she could be like, hey, let's get married, and then just, like, put him in his place. I don't know how that's going to play out.
She's probably the only person in the 7 Kingdoms that could.
Yeah, that's a weird dynamic. But, Ramsay obviously sees that the tide has turned, runs back into the castle. He's like, we can hide here. It'll be fine. They'll never get in. Punch! 1-1. Come right through the wall.
Yeah, who needs a battering ram when you have a giant?
And, just rips the gate open, but in the process is getting shot with a lot of arrows.
Yeah, he went all Boromir with it.
He went practically the dude from the end of the fall with it. Spoilers for the end of the fall, but I forget what the name of the character is.
Or what was it, anyway. Hero with Jet Li?
I didn't see that movie. Spoilers for the end of Hero with Jet Li, I guess, also. But he's a porcupine by the time he comes through that wall, and still I was thinking like maybe he's gonna be okay.
Well,
maybe
it was looking like maybe he just needs to lay down, and then Ramsay has to do his final prick move and go straight to the eyeballs.
Well, you even had that moment where John's like touching the arrows, like, how far are they in? Can we pull these out? Is it cool? And then just like as he's doing that, Ramsay right to the face with the arrow, and John gets his revenge, or doesn't completely close the deal, but that was
that's for Sansa's sake. Like, this is straight up, this is Sansa's kill.
I almost got mad though. I was like, why are you leaving this guy alive?
Yeah, I thought
like,
there was going to be like, I thought he was going to turn and he was going to like do something, but he had the literal, like, he just had the teeth knocked out of him. But the way it happened too was awesome, because they've established John as a warrior and everything, but his symbol could honestly be a shield. He's like protecting the North. So whenever you see him just going forward, carrying the Mormont shield and blocking those arrows as he's running towards a guy who's being cowardly and trying to fight him with a ranged weapon, and he still just breaks through, beats his face in with the shield, and then just gives some excellent ground and pound.
He just like goes to town with his fists. It's John's fists meet Ramsay's face, and it was a fun meeting.
Yeah,
it was nice to watch that happen.
I'm sure
but again, when we got to the end of that, I thought Ramsay was going to pull a knife out or something. I thought John was. I didn't understand, and you know what? I'm going to say maybe this is the show's fault a little bit, because I didn't understand this until afterwards, that he was doing it for Sansa.
Yeah,
I mean, but by the time Sansa,
the reason he stopped is the look that Sansa gave him, where she approved, but she also wanted to do it herself. Like, it was definitely in her look.
Yeah, I saw that I just thought he was stopping because he was like, I don't want to kill a dude in front of my sister, and I thought it was like a sort of a weak thing for him to do, where it's like, just
it's like you've killed like 30 people today. She saw some of it.
It turns out, no, he is saving him for her, and he gets. I think I can't. I'm trying to think of a more satisfying way for him to go.
Yeah, I was actually a little unsatisfied with this. It was way too good for him.
What would you have done?
I would have taken a long bat, and I would have basically put him on one of his X's, and I would have beaten him, and as soon as you beat him so hard that his ankle and foot falls off, you put a tourniquet on that, and then you do that for all of his limbs. Then you move up to the knees, and you start beating him again until his knee falls off, like, until you literally bludgeon him until his parts fall off. And then maybe whenever he's just a torso, you let the dogs just take him.
Wow, Tony, coming at you from the Middle Ages school of, well, I mean, I guess the Game of Thrones, that's pretty appropriate, but...
Or maybe one of those steam bowl things.
What? No.
Like the big brass bowl where they, like, just put a bunch of coals in there and you had to stay in there until you basically melted.
Yes, I guess that's the way to go as well.
The guy who invented it was the first one that it was used on.
I thought that was the guillotine, too.
I'm sure it probably was.
And the guy who made the brass bowl that you could burn people in. Just, like, don't invent...
There's like some weird historical ironic justice whenever you try to invent a new kill method.
It's really, really fortunate that Thomas Edison didn't end up being killed by the electric chair. Also, he should have. Well, he shouldn't have been killed, but like, kind of a dick move, Thomas Edison. Is all I'm saying. Trying to bring down Nikola Tesla. Your electric chair.
Shocking elephants. Those were Hannibal's elephants.
Bringing it back around.
But anyway, the way this ends is we see, basically, he hinted that his hounds hadn't been fed, and it's kind of convenient that they only come out whenever she starts making her threats about the hounds being hungry, but whatever, it was really cool looking, it was very cinematic, and he's like, my hounds are too loyal, and it's like, don't starve dogs.
Dogs are not loyal, not like that.
Yeah.
And I've heard real life stories of people, by the way, who left their dogs and like somehow they didn't get fed, or they were in, like a week later you come home and just like you get eaten because the dogs at a certain point do not like you're a food.
I mean, it's kind of like people.
Dogs are scavengers.
You get into an airplane crash in the Andes, you might end up eating somebody.
That's a little different, but on the same scale, on the same spectrum. The best part to me about this scene though was Sansa, like, she starts to look away, and then she's like, nah. And she looks back for a few more seconds, and, Ramsay says to her, you can't kill me because part of me will always be alive inside of you. And then she gives her a great speech about
precluding that she's pregnant. Hopefully not.
Oh. Yeah. Eey.
And I
Maybe?
hadn't thought about that until just that moment, so that's just wild speculation. I don't know how long it's been since they last hooked up, like what could be going on there. But
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, though. I didn't ever go there in my mind that she might be. And how long has it? Yeah, I don't know.
and if that's the like, if she is, then that would be a very convenient reason to marry Littlefinger, like post haste,
Ooh,
because then you'd be
you
making the Bolton family name move onward.
You are spinning out some great theories. I like where you're going. I don't know if it's true or
I
not,
have
but
no idea. I could just see it happening.
I can see that. I can see all of that falling into place like dominoes. And you see that shot even as she's walking away and he's being eaten. Kind of like you still see that smirk on her face. Like, yeah, I did that.
Yeah,
and it's
the producers called it a ghost of a smile, and I'm like, that wasn't very ghostly. It was just straight up a smile.
woo. I'm a ghost.
That ghost smile. It's like the Cheshire
no, you're just a
cat
dude in
died.
a sheet. Go away. Um.
It's like that old Onion quote. I once thought I saw an angel, but it was really just my uncle in a druid cloak jacking off over me.
Okay.
Thanks, the Onion.
Here's my concern though. Whatever happens next with Littlefinger, I don't want to lose this win for Sansa.
Yeah.
I don't. If she ends up marrying him, I'm okay with that as a thing that could happen, but it needs to be a calculated move for her. She needs to still have some power here, because if they're like, oh, but she still doesn't know how to play the game. No, screw you. She's playing the game. Okay, she knows how to play the game. She's like ruthless. She's won over Ramsay. She's survived this. Let her have her win. That's what I want from this show. If they like go back on that and be like, well,
Yeah, she all of a sudden just goes back to being a pawn after she totally saved Winterfell.
yeah, I will. I mean, again, I'm probably not going to stop watching the show, but that would be a sort of a disappointment for me.
Yeah, especially because they've been showing in the last few episodes, like, yeah, the women are kind of doing better than the guys on all fronts.
On all fronts, and that's sort of the interesting progressive model of Game of Thrones, right? You have the people rising up against the power. You have the women coming into power over the men. It's this interesting dynamic that doesn't. It feels very natural to the show, and yet is very, very much. Even Cersei to a certain point, although she's not.
Well, her machinations are starting to fail. She was in power for a long time before all this.
But it's her versus what's her name?
Marjorie?
Hot lady
Olenna?
from. No, well, Elena might have been hot at a certain point.
Yes,
and
Marjorie.
Maybe if you're into that, Marjorie. Her versus Marjorie and Olenna. Like, I mean, the High Sparrow's in there, definitely mixing it up, and he's a part of that equation too. But there's a lot of women now in power fighting it out, and the dudes too. But
yeah, and you've got Brienne being like one of the best knights out there.
definitely, she gets to rep the the sort of more visceral side of the fighting, whereas all these other women are in the leadership role. So it's interesting to sort of pull that apart and see, and that's because of that, among many other reasons. And I know a lot of people have criticized Game of Thrones and their attitude kind of towards rape and certain things, especially with the Sansa storyline, but especially because of
at least 2 people that stopped watching because of the Sansa rape. I've been trying to get them to come around, but it's a hard line for them.
Well, listen, I respect people's opinions on that. I understand that's I think I don't know exactly how I would have done it differently, but it did feel like you guys are dragging this like really hard into the sand, and yet, as I mentioned, we do have this other sort of more progressive, feminine power thing coming through in the show, and that's why I don't want to see more Sansa failing. I want her to continue to play the game. I'm not saying she needs to be invincible or that she never makes a mistake anymore, but that she's not at a pawn level at this point. She needs to level up. She needs to do her pawn conversion to queen, which is a real move in chess. For those of you, that's an old callback, Tony.
Yeah, go back to October. You might figure that one out.
Yeah, it was
October,
we talked about it on the
November, something
podcast,
like that.
on the main podcast. What do you think the final episode holds in store for us here.
It's a little bit hard to tell because I don't think we're going to get Clegane Bowl in this episode.
No, not this episode.
They are setting that up, and that'll be probably one of the biggest things that happens in the next season or half season or however they want to do this. I don't know. The episode 10 is usually just tying up loose ends and like putting a few things propped up for the next season. I really hope we get to see Daenerys actually sailing across the sea. I really want to see her actually going back to Westeros. That's what I imagine that this would end on, is her on those ships going across.
Cersei at the end of this episode, alive or dead?
That's a really good 50-50 thing. I feel like her luck is running out, but I also don't know how Clegane Bowl would work with her dying. Like, are they going to give her mercy if she admits her sins? Like, is she going to admit her sins, or is she going to claim innocence? Like, it's hard to say.
And Jaime has to come into that equation too, right? Like, we saw a little bit of him with the Freys. Is he going to sort of raise an army of the Freys and come back and sort of try to do what they had done before again?
Use the Freys to just blow up the city? We just see King's Landing in ruin.
That's Cersei's bag more than Jaime. Jaime, I think, is more of a battle guy. I mean, the whole reason that he killed the king way back when he became the King Slayer, when he killed the Targaryen,
the Mad King.
His name, yes, Aerys or Aaron, Aegon, one of those. I think it was Aegon, actually.
Yeah.
When he killed the Mad King, he killed him because he was talking about blowing everybody in the city up.
I've got another wild speculation point to put on, and if you don't want to know the spoiler, just hit pause, move it forward about a minute. Because a lot of people think that it's not going to be Tyrion that ends up killing her as part of the prophecy with the whole, like, Valinquor thing. That it's going to be Jaime because she's going to try to set the city on fire, and it's the only way to stop her. Because there's precedence that he's willing to go against his oaths, going against everything that he's sworn to save the city, to save the kingdom.
But she is, as he mentioned in his whole speech previously, like his only truth, his reality, for lack of a better word, his religion. He only believes in his love for her. So what does that do to him if he kills her? He's not gonna kill her and then be like, well, I'm gonna go get some, burgers at Five Guys and, maybe have a little beer after that and we'll be good. Like, no, if he kills her, like, he's going out with her. That's the only way I can see and I'm sure that they would set it up in a way where that could happen. I don't know specifically how that would go.
If that happens, I don't think it'll be in next episode. I'm gonna lean towards she survives this. Just because she's always so crafty. But if she survives this again, that's how they ended last season. So it's hard to really say.
Well, last season was not so much about her surviving, but it was about that walk of shame. It's hard to tell how this is going to go. The High Septon might have more use for her alive than dead. If he leaves her alive, maybe she makes a deal with him and says, hey, I'll give you more power. Or, I don't know what else she has left to give.
Like, you finally got the king on your side. Do you really want to tempt that would cause him to go against it?
That's a good point as well.
Like, killing his mother is not a good way to endear yourself to a king.
I know that the final episode is not usually the biggest, most bombastic stuff, but that's not really what interests me.
Well, isn't the title kind of important, though?
What is the title?
I thought it was Winds of Winter or something like that.
That is pretty important. If we see... Man, we can't see the wall come down at the end of the next episode, can we?
That could be the very last thing we see.
We don't have an... Well, I guess we have a wrap-up to the Arya storyline. We don't really have to go back to her.
Yeah, she's going back home. She might fast travel. We'll see if she uses that option or if she takes it legit.
She shows up at Winterfell like right after everybody leaves.
Yeah.
Dagnabbit! I'm always... That would be great to see them get back together and sort of that trio kind of, after all they've been through, sort of march forward together with all of their combined, skills. Sansa with her treachery, Arya with her assassin skills, and Jon with his dubious leadership capabilities after this episode.
Yeah. Do you think we'll find out about who his mother is in this episode? Because that was actually hinted at in the Braun Matrix footage as well.
It was hinted at, but I don't.
Like you see somebody holding the hand of a dying woman, and it looks like it could be Ned.
I don't know who would give us that information at this point.
Like the only way we could see it is like Bran, and then like Bran is like, I have to tell them, and he goes through, and then the wall crumbles.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
I guess I could see that.
I'm wondering if that's going to be the thing. I think, as far as like wild speculation, we might be running a little bit dry though. It might be time to wrap this up.
I think it is. We were at an hour on my clock,
Yep.
so
hey, we're not longer than the episode. It was 69 minutes tonight.
Hurry! Wrap it up fast.
Anyway, thank you guys for listening this far. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you're listening to the podcast on the actual podcast service, thank you very much. Let us know what you think of this episode, various other episodes, or about our movie reviews. We did a really cool one on Hong Kill Dong last week. We got a lot of really cool stuff coming out on the channel, so be sure to check out humanechoes.com, buy a t-shirt, the links are at the top, and you guys have an awesome, awesome week.
We will wrap things up with the final episode of Game of Thrones, this season anyway, next week. See y'all then.
Bye.
It was.